would like to welcome you this evening to the initial public meeting of the Los Lunas I-25 Interchange and East-West Corridor project. Thank you for joining us tonight. This meeting formally launches the official process that will lead to a new interchange and a new East-West corridor being designed and constructed in Los Lunas. A project that's expected to ease traffic congestion for thousands of drivers throughout the village and surrounding Valencia County. I'm Kevin Eads, professional engineer and project manager with Moles & Corbin. Thank you for joining us online. We would like to invite you to ask questions throughout the meeting by posting them on our Facebook post with tonight's broadcast. Your input at this beginning stage is crucial because it will help our engineering and planning team design the best project possible. We'll have a better sense of your preferences, given that you, as the residents and drivers of Los Lunas and Valencia County, will be the ones using this route on a daily basis. It will also allow us to take a proactive approach to solving any potential challenges that may arise and doing it before the first dirt is ever turned. Don't forget, you can find out more about the project at our website, llcorridor.com. That's llcorridor.com. Joining us in tonight's virtual meeting are the following local officials and project engineers: Mayor Charles Griego with the Village of Los Lunas, Wyatt Karchner, PE and project engineer with Moles & Corbin, Sean Melville, PE structural engineer with Bohannon Houston, John Tashik, senior project manager with Ecosphere Environmental Services, and Megan Baer, right-of-way manager with Tierra Right-of-Way Services. To start the meeting, we'd like to give a summary of how the Los Lunas I-25 Interchange and East-West Corridor project came to be and what the village hopes to accomplish with its construction. This long-awaited project has been in the planning process for about 2 decades. Transportation planners long recognized the shortfalls of the village's reliance upon New Mexico Highway 6 as the community's only east-west route and only crossing point over the Rio Grande in a 17-mile stretch. And sure enough, today, well, prior to the pandemic, drivers would routinely experience intense traffic congestion, particularly during peak travel times like the daily commute. If you've lived here for even a short time, you're probably very aware of just how congested this main thoroughfare can become. These backlogs create not only headaches for drivers, but risks to the community, considering that first responders, police, and ambulances must also contend with these traffic problems. We will now hear an update from Mayor Charles Griego of the Village of Los Lunas.
Hello, I'm Charles Griego, Mayor of the Village of Los Lunas, and I want to welcome you to this virtual meeting for the new I-25 Interchange and East-West Corridor project. The Village of Los Lunas has been working on this project for over 20 years, and it appears that our tuning efforts have been successful. This project is important for the future and safety of our village and the entire county of Valencia. This project would have not been successful without the assistance and continuing support of our state legislators, the New Mexico Department of Transportation, the Valencia County Commission, and last but not least, the council members, employees, and residents of the Village of Los Lunas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. The project we're discussing this evening, the Los Lunas I-25 Interchange and East-West Corridor project, is expected to greatly ease the previously mentioned traffic flow problems by providing an alternative route for drivers to travel from west to east, or vice versa, across the valley. The project will be a boon to the county's fast-growing population, which numbers close to 80,000 people. Here are the roles and responsibilities for the I-25 Interchange and East-West Corridor project. First, the Village of Los Lunas. They have provided local funding and are the project proponent, also known as the local lead. The Department of Transportation has provided state funding, and they're responsible for the oversight on behalf of the Federal Highway Administration. The Federal Highway Administration has provided federal funding, and they are the federal lead for the NEPA process. The purpose and need for the corridor are best summarized as follows: to address deficiencies of the existing transportation system, to reduce congestion on New Mexico 6, to provide enhanced access for the entire county, and to improve emergency access and response times for the village and Valencia County. The Los Lunas Corridor project is listed on the STIP, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Plan, and is funded with federal, state, and local funding. The preliminary project estimate is $97.7 million. There's currently $2 million for right-of-way efforts and $7.6 million for design. Additional funding has been made available towards construction in the amount of $3.5 million from the Village of Los Lunas and Valencia County, as well as $50 million from the Department of Transportation and the New Mexico State Legislature. I would like to introduce Wyatt Karchner, professional engineer and project engineer here with Moles & Corbin.
Thank you, Kevin. What I'd like to do now is go through our current scope of the project and the things that we are working on. The first thing we are working on is an IACR, or an Interstate Access Change Request. The next thing we are working on is an environmental document, and John will talk about this more later. We are also working on right-of-way mapping and acquisition, and also the design of the new roadway. An IACR is a federal document required by Federal Highway Administration for a new interchange or modifications to an interchange. The first step in an IACR is an assumptions document. This document sets forth all of the methodology that we are going to use to prepare the IACR. This assumptions document is then reviewed and approved by the NMDOT and Federal Highway Administration. The goal of this is to show that the change in access to the interstate will not have a negative impact on the interstate and that local roadways cannot be improved to fix the problem. As part of this, we will do an extensive safety analysis. This will include looking at historic crash data and determining how improvements to geometry and new roadways will impact the safety of the existing facilities and the interstate. We are also doing a traffic analysis. This traffic analysis is used to determine how many vehicles will be using the new roadway. In order to do this, we have conducted vehicle and pedestrian counts along many routes in the area. These include New Mexico 47, New Mexico 314, New Mexico 6, and Interstate 25. Once we have completed the traffic counts, we will then complete a traffic model. This traffic model is calibrated using the traffic counts to ensure that it is predicting accurately. We then input land use and growth factors, which we coordinate with the Middle Rio Grande Council of Governments. This is then used to project new traffic volumes along the corridor and within the region. What I want to do now is walk you through the entire corridor from west to east. This new interchange will be located on I-25, approximately 1 mile south of the existing I-25 New Mexico 6 interchange. This new interchange will be a signalized diamond interchange with a new roadway going under I-25. This will require 2 new bridges to pass I-25 traffic over the new roadway. The interchange will include acceleration and deceleration lanes to safely merge and diverge traffic onto the interstate. As we continue to the east, the new roadway will have an ultimate lane configuration which will include 2 lanes in each direction, separated by a raised median. Curb and gutter will be on the north side of the roadway, and a multi-use path will also be on the north side. The current access to Camelot Drive will be modified and connected to Sickler with a new intersection with the existing Morris Road. There will be a new intersection for Sickler and the correctional facility, which will include dedicated left turn lanes in each direction. This new intersection will align and will not be offset as it currently is. As we continue to the east, the access to the courthouse and Daniel Fernandez Park are being modified and pushed further from New Mexico 314. We are still working on the details to finalize access to the park to ensure proper traffic circulation. As we approach the New Mexico 314 intersection, we will again widen our new roadway to include dedicated left and right turn lanes. This will continue to be a signalized intersection with ADA improvements. As we continue to the east, we will cross over the railroad tracks. The railroad track crossing will be widened, however, will remain at grade. We will then approach the Los Lentes intersection, which will include dedicated left turn lanes. The roadway will then curve and the grade will rise as we prepare to cross over the Rio Grande. We will provide access to the wastewater treatment plant and for the levees. We will then approach the Ideal intersection, which again has left turn lanes. And finally, as we reach the eastern end of the corridor, we will terminate at New Mexico 47 and Hyde Road. At this location, we are utilizing a high T intersection. This intersection is commonly used in areas with high traffic volumes. This will be a signalized intersection, however, will have many free-flowing movements. This includes the movement of New Mexico 47 northbound, the movement from the new roadway to New Mexico 47 southbound, and finally the movement from New Mexico 47 south to the new roadway.
I'd like to introduce John Tashik, Senior Project Manager with Ecosphere Environmental Services.
Thank you, Kevin. Because the project will use state and federal funding, we must follow the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, process. NEPA requires that social, economic, and environmental factors be considered in project decision-making. NEPA does not require that a project have no impacts. Rather, it requires that potential impacts be considered in relation to the no-build alternative. Typically, a wide range of environmental issues are considered, as shown on this slide, but only those relevant to the project are studied in detail. For this project, because it's on a new alignment, involves a river crossing and interchange, and is a complex undertaking, we are preparing an environmental assessment under the New Mexico Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration guidelines. Currently, detailed studies are underway of cultural resources, biological and water resources, noise, hazardous materials, and community impacts. Preliminary findings are shown here. Although the project involves a new river crossing, the span bridge design will minimize impacts to the river channel and associated resources. Permitting is required through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, and Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. Coordination with these agencies has been ongoing. Cultural resource surveys show that there are numerous historic acequias and irrigation ditches that will be crossed, but the irrigation function of these facilities will be maintained. The project may affect the rural agricultural character of the area, and several historic buildings and at least one archaeological site also occur in the project area. Impacts to these resources will be determined in coordination with the New Mexico Department of Transportation and State Historic Preservation Officer. There is habitat for several endangered species in the river area, including southwestern willow flycatcher, Rio Grande silvery minnow, and the yellow-billed cuckoo. We will continue to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the design team to avoid, minimize, and/or mitigate any impacts to these species. The project will also affect some farmland. The project will likely have beneficial effects on air quality due to reductions in congestion on New Mexico 6 and elsewhere. It will likely affect the visual landscape of the area and will involve some right-of-way acquisition and several relocations. Community and land use issues will be affected by the project, which will introduce a major new roadway into what is largely a rural agricultural area. Access will be maintained to local properties and neighborhoods, and the project will serve several planned development proposals. The project will also reduce congestion in other parts of the community and enhance emergency response services. We are looking forward to your input on community concerns. The project will provide improvements to pedestrian and bicycle facilities and accessibility. Concerns with hazardous materials are not anticipated, but the studies are still ongoing. Project is not expected to have disproportionate and adverse impacts to low-income or minority populations, as defined under the Executive Order on Environmental Justice. Finally, the project will likely increase traffic noise in the more rural parts of the corridor. Noise mitigation measures, such as noise barriers, are under study for the project under future traffic conditions. The next phase of the study will include the environmental assessment, which will be presented at another public hearing. Your input is important during the current phase to help define issues and community concerns. Thank you, Kevin.
I'd like to now introduce Megan Baer, Right-of-Way Manager with Tierra Right-of-Way Services.
Thank you, Kevin, and good evening, everyone. We will be assisting Moles & Corbin and the Village of Los Lunas with acquiring the necessary property to complete this project. So this evening I'm going to go over the acquisition process and what you can expect. Based on the preliminary design and the current information available, we anticipate that there are approximately 50 parcels that will be impacted, and those parcels are owned by about 25 property owners. We will be following the federal regulations. It's known as the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies Act of 1970 as amended, which, as you can hear, is a real mouthful, so we'll be referring to it as the Uniform Act. The purpose of the Uniform Act is to provide fair, equitable, and consistent treatment, minimize adverse impacts, and to be good stewards of public funds and taxpayer dollars. And additionally, we also have oversight from the New Mexico Department of Transportation Right-of-Way Bureau. So the NMDOT Right-of-Way Bureau will be monitoring the acquisition and relocation process, providing reviews and approvals throughout the process to ensure that we're following the Uniform Act correctly and that we're also following all of the NMDOT guidelines. I'm going to give an overview of the acquisition process so that property owners can have an idea of what to expect. So the first thing we did was we notified all of the property owners. So you may be a property owner who owns property in the area, watching this presentation, looking at the maps that Kevin provided and wondering, is my property going to be impacted? It's not really clear. If you haven't already heard from us, if you haven't already received correspondence or communication from TR Right-of-Way Services, then the answer to that question is no, we do not anticipate your property will be impacted. So right now we're working on our due diligence activities. We've pulled title reports to identify the current vesting ownerships, and that information has been provided to the surveyors. The land surveyors from Bohannon, Houston have been out doing their field work along the project corridor to identify and survey the boundaries of the project limits. Concurrently with those due diligence activities, Tierra will also be completing relocation planning. So we'll identify any parcels that involve the displacement of individuals, families, businesses, or farm operations. We'll meet with those folks, prepare a relocation plan to address any anticipated problems or challenges and minimize impacts. So essentially it's a plan of how we'll complete the relocations. The surveyors will prepare the right-of-way maps. That's a map of the corridor showing each parcel and the property that the village needs to acquire. Those maps will be submitted to the NMDOT for review and approval. And once they're approved by DOT, then we can commence the acquisition activities. The first thing we'll do is complete an appraisal report. The initial appraisal report will be completed by a general certified appraiser familiar with the area and with expertise in the valuation of partial acquisitions and public infrastructure projects. The surveyors will stake the right-of-way line, so they'll go out into the field and they'll mark on the ground where the proposed right-of-way will be, and the appraiser will contact each property owner and schedule an appraisal inspection. And I strongly encourage property owners to attend that appraisal inspection because you know your property better than anyone else, and it's important for you to share that information with the appraiser. The appraiser will prepare his report, and that will be submitted to a second general certified appraiser. This is known as the review appraisal process in the Uniform Act. The second appraiser will review the initial appraisal report to ensure that it complies with the Uniform Act, the New Mexico DOT guidelines, and USPAP, which is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. The review appraiser will review the methodology and analysis and confirm that the conclusions are sound and justifiable. And once that initial report is approved, then that will form the basis to present an offer to property owners to actually purchase the right-of-way that the village needs to acquire. So we'll present an offer to each property owner. You'll receive a copy of the appraisal report. Concurrently with the offers to purchase, we'll also be doing the relocations. So while we're doing the acquisition process, we'll be providing relocation services and relocation benefits. So these two activities will happen concurrently. After we come to agreement, property owner accepts an offer to purchase and signs a purchase agreement, the village will close the transactions through a title and escrow company. The final step in the process is that we'll close the files and submit everything to DOT for a final review and audit to ensure that we've properly complied with the Uniform Act and all of the DOT guidelines. So that's an overview of the acquisition process. I know it's a lot of information, and we can only do a general overview this evening. If you have any specific questions or questions related to your property in particular, please don't hesitate to give me a call. My contact information is on the screen, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
I'd like to introduce Sean Melville, structural engineer with the engineering firm of Bohannon Houston.
Thank you, Kevin. There are two major bridge crossings on the new corridor. As part of our concept design process, each has gone through a bridge type selection process to establish more appropriate, feasible, and economic bridge solutions for each of the bridges. At the west end of the project limits, the new corridor crosses under I-25 at a new interchange. This new interchange will have two new independent bridges. Each will carry the northbound and southbound I-25 lanes over the new corridor. Each bridge will have a single span carried by pre-stressed girders founded behind mechanically stabilized earthen-filled walls. Each of the bridges will be 47 feet wide, carrying two 12-foot driving lanes and an 8-foot left shoulder and 12-foot right shoulder. The bridges will clear span the new corridor with a span of approximately 115 feet. These will be over two 12-foot driving lanes in each direction, a raised center median left turn lane, and 7-foot shoulders with curb and gutter. On the north side of the corridor, a 10-foot raised multi-use trail will carry the pedestrian and bike connectivity for the corridor under each of the I-25 bridges. And on the south side, an allowance will be made for future 5-foot sidewalk. The other major bridge on the project is nearly centered within the project limits. This new bridge will cross the Rio Grande. This river crossing bridge will carry the corridor's vehicular, pedestrian, and bike traffic in addition to the corridor's utilities across the river. The bridge will span approximately 2,265 feet from levee to levee with 18 equal spans, which will allow us to limit the number of piers within the active river to just 3 of the 17 piers. Each span will then be supported by pre-stressed concrete girders and founded on solid pier walls on deep foundations. The bridge will be 86 feet wide, carrying 4 driving lanes, 4-foot left and 6-foot right shoulders, all in each direction. On the north side, a 10-foot wide multi-use trail will carry the pedestrian and bike connectivity over the river. Along this trail that is connected to the bridge will be 4 river and bosque overlooks for the public to rest and take in the scenic views of the river, bosque, and its horizons. At the west side and east side approaches to the river bridge, there will be the need for access crossings for the water treatment facility, the levee and drain maintenance facilities, and the irrigation canal. These will all be accomplished by a cast-in-place 14-foot wide by 14-foot tall concrete box culvert with wing walls at each location. Thanks, Kevin.
The project is made possible with funding from the Federal Highway Administration, the State of New Mexico, the Village of Los Lunas, and Valencia County. The New Mexico Department of Transportation has previously announced that $55 million has been appropriated, $10 million from the 2019 New Mexico legislative session, and $45 million of discretionary funds from the New Mexico Department of Transportation. The village initially kick-started the project with $2.5 million of local funding, along with $2 million of bond funding from Valencia County. Approximately $2.5 million of state and federal funding rounds out the current budget and will be used for the required right-of-way and studies. The project is currently under design and 30% complete construction plans have been submitted to the NMDOT for review. The East-West Corridor project will link three main north-south routes, I-25, New Mexico 314, and New Mexico 47, with a 3.5-mile connection that will span the Rio Grande Valley and river. Engineering studies indicate that once completed, the corridor will decrease traffic on New Mexico Highway 6 by 45% and provide drivers an alternate route to reach destinations east of the river and south of the village. Overall, the new corridor will provide 3.5 miles of new 4-lane divided arterial roadway, 2 lanes in each direction, that will be access controlled and provide various modes of transportation, including pedestrians and bicyclists. That concludes tonight's presentation. We hope you find it useful and informative. We will continue to hold public meetings as the project progresses. Please continue to attend and provide your input about the Los Lunas I-25 Interchange and East-West Corridor project. Thank you for your participation and good night.
$9213. That's 575-202-9213. You can post your questions on Facebook, or you can email us to our project email address, which is contact@llcorridor.com. That's contact@llcorridor.com. What I want to start with now is some questions that we received prior to the meeting. This first question will be for Kevin, and this is from Margaret Fleming. She said, "I am not sure what you mean by access limitations. Can you please clarify?"
Thank you for the question. As far as access is concerned on the new corridor, it's regulated by a document called the Roadway Access Control Policy. It's a document that was put together by the Rio Grande Council of Governments, or the Mid-Region Council of Governments, and the New Mexico Department of Transportation. So access along this corridor is controlled and has been established at the major intersections. We do have accommodations we're making for private properties to make sure we provide access to everyone that has access now, but in the future, access for commercial and for new driveways will be considered under that policy. Thank you for your question.
Margaret also commented and said that I encourage the consideration of recreational access as the road crosses the river. She suggests access to a park or parking area so that the ditch banks can be used for walking, biking, fishing, and access to the river. She says maybe a ramp for human-powered watercraft and boats. The next comment or question that we have is from Linda Jackson. She asks, where is the nearest cross street that intersects at New Mexico 47?
So the end of the new corridor, as it intersects with New Mexico 47, is approximately located to Hyde Lane. So if you know where Hyde Lane is currently at New Mexico 47, that is the landing point for the new corridor.
The next question is from Anna Stencil. She says, we live in the Mid-Valley Air Park. We think this change will relieve the traffic hassles which have been growing worse over the last many years. We approve of the new design and are looking forward to its completion. She says, thank you for the excellent presentation. Thank you. The next comment is from Earl Freeman. He says, I am a resident living in Los Chavez, and I am very supportive of this much-needed interchange and would like to voice my opinion on this issue. How would I be heard tomorrow night? And so as we mentioned before, there's 3 ways that you can contact us. You can contact us via Facebook on our Facebook post. You can call us at 575-202-9213 or at email us at contact@llcorridor.com. The next question is going to be for Megan, and this comes from Douglas Brewster. He asks, when will the route plans be finalized so landowners can evaluate the impact to their properties? He follows up with, is there currently a finalized plan, and when will homeowners be notified of the impact to their property?
Thank you, Wyatt, and thank you for the question. We have notified property owners who will be impacted by the project. At this point, we don't have a finalized plan of the exact impacts to each property. We've been able to share with property owners a general idea of where the property acquisition will be on their property and a general idea of the square footage that we anticipate that the village will need to acquire. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the surveyors are still completing their surveys of the project limits, and those will be put into the right-of-way maps that'll be submitted to the DOT. Until the DOT approves those maps, I won't have final legal descriptions and the final surveyed area, but once the right-of-way maps are in a final draft format, we can share with property owners an exhibit that shows where we think that the acquisition areas will be.
Thank you. Douglas also has another question for John. And this question is, are there plans for sound barriers where the proposed roadway comes close to residential dwellings?
Thank you for the question. That's an important question for the study. The answer is we're in the process of doing a noise study that will look at the future traffic volumes on the new alignment, and then we will model the traffic or the traffic-related noise in the opening year and the future year. If the noise exceeds the criteria that the state and federal transportation agencies have, then we will look at noise barriers and determine if they're reasonable and feasible, both in terms of how much noise reduction they provide, what's the benefit to the surrounding land uses, costs, and things like that, whether they're feasible from an engineering standpoint. So the short answer is it's likely that there will be noise barriers in areas where the development is in close proximity to the new alignment.
Thank you, John. The next is a comment from William Maxwell, and he says, I strongly support this project. The next couple of questions I will go ahead and answer. This question is also, I'm not sure, I guess this is from William Maxwell as well. He says, will the new east-west road incorporate the existing Morris Road right-of-way between I-25 and New Mexico 314? And the answer to that is yes and no. So at New Mexico 314, we will be on the same alignment as the existing Morris Road and also as we approach the correctional facility. However, between the correctional facility and New Mexico 314, the roadway is offset south of the existing Morris Road alignment, and the existing Morris Road alignment will be used as a frontage road. He also asks, what are the requirements or options for bike lanes on the new road? Kevin, would you like to address that?
Sure. We're planning on a multi-use trail all along the north side of the new corridor. So that trail would extend from one end to the other, including over the new river bridge. Of course, at all the intersections, we will provide pedestrian amenities to allow people to safely cross the streets and remain on the trail. Also on the bridge, as Sean mentioned, there are overlooks being added to the multi-use trail that will provide places for people to stop and rest or simply take in the views of the river.
Thank you. He also asks, will there be an overpass where the new road crosses New Mexico 314 and the railroad? I can answer that. And at this time, there is not. All of this will be an at-grade intersection. We have looked at going over both New Mexico 314 and the railroad tracks. However, it does add significant costs, and does create significant access issues for the park, the courthouse, and all of the properties in that area. His final question is, how can we citizens influence full build-out to 4 lanes and access limitations instead of a phased construction? Kevin, would you like to address that?
We appreciate your question and we appreciate your enthusiasm for the project. Unfortunately, we're in a position where the project budget at $97 million requires a lot of funding, of course, to fund the entire project. It's more realistic to think that the funding will show up in phases or in smaller budgets as we approach different funding sources, federal, state, and local. So we do anticipate that the project will be constructed in phases, most likely at this point starting from the from the east end and then continuing to the west. Although we'd like to build the entire thing, we will most likely end up phasing it.
Thank you. And what I'd like to do now is address our first question that we have received from Facebook tonight. And that question comes from Joe Wicker. He says, I own a property at the end of the project right where the corridor connects to New Mexico 47 on the northwest corner. How can I ensure that there is a drive pad installed? Kevin, would you like to address that?
I actually think I know the project being discussed, and I'm thinking that that property does have access. As you can imagine, this is a project that's being planned to move traffic. We're trying to relieve congestion on New Mexico 6 and allow traffic to travel at a decent rate of speed to increase the efficiency of trips from people going to Albuquerque to work and then coming home in the evening. So it will be a facility more like Paseo del Norte in Albuquerque, where it will be access controlled. Again, I'll mention that previously we mentioned the rack policy, and that policy will require us to limit access. However, we will make all measures to provide access to all the current property owners and at their access points.
Thank you, Kevin. The next question, also from Facebook, comes from Taylor Dawson, and they ask, will Camelot still be connected to Morris? And I can address that comment. Camelot will not be connected to Morris in our current plan. We are planning to realign Camelot so that it will connect to Sickler with a new intersection at Sickler and the existing Morris Road. And then this interchange, or this road, will then connect to the new alignment at an intersection at the correctional facility. The next question, also from Facebook, comes from Liz Torres, and she asks, is a sound study being done to see how much noise will be created with the increased traffic? I'm concerned that the volume of noise between the exits on I-25 will go way up. John, can you address this?
Yes, and I think I answered some of that previously, but the answer is yes, a sound study is being done, and we are extending, I think your question may be addressed to sound off of I-25 between the two exits, and we are going to study part of that corridor and look at, within the project limits, which extend several thousand feet, on I-25. So we will be looking at that area and what the effects on properties adjacent to the interstate are. And then, as I said before, we will be looking at the new alignment as well, the new east-west alignment and the effects of sound on the properties in that corridor, and using the same criteria that I described before.
Thank you, John. I want to remind everybody we are taking your questions live on Facebook. You can post them in the chat. We are also taking them on our email at contact@llcorridor.com, or also by phone at 575-202-9213. This next question is also from Facebook and comes from Liz Torres. Oh, I'm sorry, we just read that one. This next question comes from Vera Gibson. She asks, how will this affect agricultural properties in the area? John, can you address this one as well?
Well, there will be effects on agricultural properties. We are taking some farmland in the valley through the corridor. We will make efforts to assure that irrigation and access is retained to the remaining agricultural land. We will talk with the property owners and find out what sort of access for equipment is necessary, and we will maintain the availability of irrigation waters to those properties that remain.
Thank you, John. The next question we got from an email from Tracy Martinez, and they ask, I live on Omar Road, which is across from Hyde Road on New Mexico 47. Will there be a traffic light or some type of access due to congestion at this new intersection? And to answer your question, Tracy, yes, there will be. We are putting in a signalized intersection at this location. We are currently looking at a high T intersection, which will allow for free flow movements for New Mexico 47 northbound, as well as movement from New Mexico 47 southbound to the new roadway, and from the new roadway to New Mexico 47 southbound. Yeah, we do have more questions coming in on Facebook. We're getting these pulled up. Again, you can continue to post and we will answer your questions. If you do want to call, please feel free to do that. Our number is 575-202-9213. Our next question is from James Ansel. Is this north or south of New Mexico 6? Kevin, you want to answer that?
The project alignment for the new corridor is about 1.6 miles south of the existing New Mexico 6.
Thank you, Kevin. We also have a few more comments coming in from Facebook. This question or comment is from Earl Freeman. He says, let me read through here. I think his biggest concern is there is no main access for businesses other than the frontage road to serve New Mexico 314 north and south. Kevin, would you like to address that? Sure.
To some extent, that's true. As I explained earlier, the new corridor is being provided to move traffic. It's actually an access controlled. We're anticipating that it would move traffic instead of ending up like New Mexico 6 with a lot of driveways which impede traffic. So we are aware there's some commercial properties on the new corridor, and we're trying to make allowances for that, such as the frontage road. However, the majority of the property in that section of the roadway between the interstate and New Mexico 314, where I think you're suggesting, the portion of the property on the south side of the alignment is all state-owned property. They're surrounding the correction facility. So we will make accommodations on that north side off of the frontage road, which is the existing Morris Road alignment, for those commercial properties.
Thank you, Kevin. This next question comes from Janet Jarrett, and she asks, are you going to make sure that I have access to my farmland, which is potentially cut off by the project? Kevin?
And if I understand correctly, looking at the maps, I believe that property is just east of New Mexico 314, just south of the new alignment, and then west of the ditch and the river. There is a full intersection being planned for Los Lentes, and we will make accommodations, of course, for those properties off of Los Lentes, and we'll look at any other accommodations that need to be considered. Thank you for your question, Jarrett.
The next question comes from Stacy Shane, and they're asking, how long will this project take to complete, and when is the estimated start date? At this point, we are estimating that the construction of the project will take approximately 18 months, and we are anticipating that construction will start in the spring of 2022. Continuing to field your questions as they come in, so please be patient as we're getting those pulled up here. This next comment or question is also from Facebook, from Regina Benavides. They're asking, wasn't there another location that was looked at? The distance between the two off-ramps is too short. And to address this question, I think, yes, in the previous corridor studies, which Kevin talked about, and you can tag on here, Kevin, to add to the response to this question, is there was a corridor study that was completed about 10 years ago by the COG. And during that study, they looked at multiple alternatives and alignments, and this was the selected and recommended alternative. Kevin, would you like to add to that? No?
No, I think you answered it well. Thank you, Wyatt.
And then the next part of your question was the distance between the ramps is too close. I'm assuming that's your separation between the northbound off-ramp and the southbound on and off ramps. We can look at that more closely. However, we have done a traffic study and looked at the queuing necessary there, and this does meet those requirements. If that is not your location you're concerned about, if you would, please let us know so we can clarify that for you. The next question comes from Dave Tyron. He is asking, has the effect to businesses along Main Street been analyzed? Kevin, would you like to answer that?
Sure. I mean, there's probably two ways to address that. The first of which is that we did have a lot of the businesses along New Mexico 6 or Main Street come to us with the concern that traffic gets so congested there that people can't make left ins or left outs of their properties. So they've actually asked us, and they asked for improvements and support the new corridor. The second way to answer that, we do have traffic studies that are being conducted. Of course, that's very difficult right now under the pandemic because a lot of people, as they should be, are staying home. So we don't have the cars out on the roadway that we normally would. But we are taking some counts from the past, inflating those and using them to the best that we can to study that traffic, which does take into account the movements in and out of those businesses. Now, as we stated in the presentation, a lot of the traffic off New Mexico 6, we know about 40% of that traffic is trying to travel to a destination that is east of the village and south of the village. It's a lot of the properties that lay out in the county. So we do know once the new roadway's in place from one end to the other, I-25 to New Mexico 47, that it will take a considerable amount of that traffic off of New Mexico 6, which would help those businesses.
Thank you, Kevin. Janet Jarrett has also emailed us, and she is asking that we meet with her, and we can do that, Janet. And also, as far as your connection, we are sorry that you were having issues, and we will have this presentation continue to be posted on Facebook and also on our website, llcorridor.com, so that you can come back and view this at another time at your convenience. The next question, I think, is for John, and this comes from Stacy Shane. And they're asking, will there be protection for agricultural land? And will zone changes be pushed through for commercial development?
Well, thank you, and that's an important consideration. I think I already said that there will be some agricultural land that will be acquired as part of the project, and that land will be gone. The remaining land, I mean, our charge is to, provide for the project, and that will include maintaining the irrigation functions of the irrigation ditches, and there are many in the corridor, and also providing access for farm equipment and the type of operations that those agricultural lands require and utilize. But we won't have any control or any effect on the zoning and the future use of adjacent land in the corridor. So I don't know if I can tell you the answer to that. All I can address is the effect of the project, and we will do our best to maintain the agricultural uses that are present now.
Thank you, John. The next question comes from Freddie Rodriguez, and Kevin, you're probably going to be the best to answer this question. This question is not necessarily related to this project, but to a roadway within the village or the county. He is asking that he's saying Meadow Lake Road needs a major facelift, and who would they talk to for that?
The Meadow Lake roadway is actually in the county, under the jurisdiction of Valencia County. The best person to call would be at the county offices to Lena Benavides or to the county manager, Danny Monette.
Thank you, Kevin. This question is also from Facebook, and it is from Dave Tyron. And they are asking, with the traffic being rerouted from Main Street to Morris, has the traffic through Highway 47 and El Cerro V Hill Road and south on New Mexico 47 been modeled? Kevin, you want to answer that?
I'll do my best. So we have looked at, the traffic study did take into place a model that looked at the traffic patterns near the end of our corridor on the east end with New Mexico 47. It does look at the area surrounding the corridor and out miles away from it. Does model those traffic patterns and try to predict traffic based on land types, number of lanes, roadways, where stop signs are, where major employment centers are, where schools are. So we have got a pretty good look at that. As far as specifically modeling some of the other roads on the eastern portion of this project or beyond our project limits and the possibility of connecting them into the future. It is something that has been mentioned by Valencia County, but is not currently included under the scope that the funding for this project supports.
Thank you, Kevin. We're also receiving more comments from Facebook. This one comes from Jill Cole. They're asking, Meadow Lake is a county road, and Valencia County does have funding last year and this upcoming year to do improvements on Meadow Lake. And so I think that answers the previous question that was asked. Again, we are taking your questions live on Facebook, email at llcorridor, or contact at llcorridor.com, or call us at 575-202-9213. This question is from Tom Spangler on Facebook, or comment, and he says, I have been hearing about this project for 10 years. How realistic is it, and when will construction likely begin? Kevin, you want to address that?
Sure, and I sure appreciate where your question comes from. We've been working on this project for about 20 years, so we all anticipate it greatly. Fortunately for us, we do have money that has been allocated for the project from the legislature and locally, also from the New Mexico Department of Transportation. So yes, it is very real at this point. As you've seen in the presentation, we are complete with 30% design. We do anticipate about 18 months of construction starting in the spring of 2022.
Thank you, Kevin. This next comment came from our call-in number from Joseph Bobkick, and he says that he has property at the south end of Sickler, and he's asking how will access be from Morris, Sickler, and Camelot? I can address some of that. So Sickler is going to have a new intersection which will align with the correctional facility, and from there, a few hundred feet to the north, there will be another intersection with Camelot and the existing Morris Road alignment. So people accessing Sickler will continue to access it basically where you do now on the existing Morris Road. I think we're moving it to the east just slightly to improve that intersection with the correctional facility. Again, we are still taking comments from Facebook. This next one is from L'Oreal Armstrong. They're asking, is the road going over Edill, or is there a planned intersection? I can answer that as well. What we are planning to do at Edill and the new roadway is have a at-grade intersection. We are currently looking to see if that needs to be a signalized intersection. However, there will still be access to Edill at that location. Okay, we're still getting several of your questions coming in. If you guys would like to call us at 575-202-9213 or email us at contact@llcorridor.com. or also continue to post on our Facebook page. We have another comment from Sue Holmes Goheen. And this is a question for you, Megan. And she is asking, when will the appraisal process start?
The appraisal process will start after we have approved right-of-way maps, which are the land surveys. Realistically, I anticipate that will be spring 2021. The land surveyors are still finishing their survey work. That'll be submitted to DOT. Once DOT reviews and approves the right-of-way maps, then we can start the appraisal process.
Okay, thank you, Megan. This next question is emailed, and I'm thinking we may have answered this one from Tracy. Is that who this one's from? Yes, yeah, we've answered that one.
Yes, we did.
So I think this question is for John. The question is, will there be additional public meetings or a public hearing in the future?
Yeah, thank you for your question. And the answer to that is yes. This is a public information meeting, our kickoff of the corridor, the continuation of the corridor study process. Once we have prepared the environmental assessment and it is approved for release by FHWA and the Department of Transportation, we will hold a formal public hearing. We expect that to be sometime in the early spring.
Thank you, John. Okay, we do have one more question coming in from Facebook who we'd like to answer for you guys. Okay, this is from Earl Freeman. His question is, without convenient business before the New Mexico 314 intersection, how is this going to affect real traffic? For example, I'm driving home from Albuquerque. The kids want dinner and mom wants milk. Now instead of taking the interchange, I'm going to have to go down Main Street, pick up milk and food before I get to 314. And then his concern is about waiting in traffic. So he's asking how much more, what's the goal of the new interchange and how is it truly going to impact traffic, I think. Kevin, do you want to address that one?
And again, I've got two different ways to address that, Earl, and I hope I answer your question. One, of course, is that most of the property around the new interchange is private in nature, and some of that close to the interchange is zone commercial. And we know from master plans on the west side of the interstate that there are plans for commercial businesses in that area. So in the future, once this is constructed, I think it's fair to say that when you build it, they will come. Some of those commercial properties would develop. Another way of looking at that is in the studies for the project, we did what we call a license plate study. And what that does is studies all of the cars coming into all points of access into the village and then also how they leave. And by studying that, you actually write down the license plate number as the car comes in and write down the license plate as the number as the car vehicle leaves. And what you can do is cross that information and find out if the people traveling in are coming in, making a quick stop, and then traveling through the village, if they're coming in or stopping in the village, and you get a good sense of what people are doing. The traffic on New Mexico 6, as we mentioned before, about 40% of that traffic is simply trying to move through. So one of the purposes, as we mentioned earlier, is to allow for that large group of movements to have a convenient way to jump on the new corridor and get across the valley. I do understand your question, and as we know, there's a lot of those developments on New Mexico 6, and like I mentioned, the commercial properties that most likely will be developed and address your concern.
Thank you, Kevin. We also have another email question from Tracy Martinez. They are asking, what is the current volume of traffic on Highway 6 314, and New Mexico 47 daily, and do you see traffic volume increasing due to this new bypass project? I can answer some of that, and then I'll probably have Kevin answer some of this as well. We have done traffic counts on all of these roadways. I don't have exact traffic counts in front of us. If that's something you're interested in, Tracy, we can get you that information. And we do expect that traffic would increase on the new roadway. However, we do project that traffic on New Mexico 6 will be decreased. As that Kevin has mentioned, lots of the people that we anticipate in our traffic model shows to use this new roadway currently access Highway 6 and then go to places that are east of the river and south of the village. And so this new roadway will handle a lot of that traffic, freeing up traffic volume on New Mexico 6. This next question comes from Facebook, comes from Sue Holmes Goheen as well. They are asking, what is the plan for the correction facility? Will it be walled off? Kevin, would you like to address that one?
Yes, and that's a very good question. We've had it come up multiple times, and we have addressed it through the process with the correction facility and with General Services Department, who's in charge of those properties around the correction facility. That is one of the areas that John talked about, where we are going to look at noise in the area and see if a sound wall would be appropriate there. As you know, the correction facility is currently fenced off as far as the protection of the correctional facility to the public, and then also to keep inmates, in their grounds. As far as a large, very tall wall all along the perimeter, that is not currently being looked at in the project.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, we have a few more coming in on Facebook. Okay, this comment is from Desiree Easley. She says, we live on Sickler Road and are concerned that Sickler will become a main access to the corridor. And how could this impact heavy traffic if there is an accident on Highway 6 before or at New Mexico 314? You want to address that, Kevin?
Sure, and I think that it absolutely could increase slightly. Right now, one of the opportunities of this new corridor is to provide the second alternative in case there is an accident on New Mexico 6. So the traffic most likely would continue down the interstate, access the new corridor, travel to New Mexico 314 and back, or across the river and back. So there's an opportunity that it could help. The current condition now, if there's any kind of a problem on New Mexico 6, the only opportunities are either to use Camelot as a way to access down on Morris Road to 314, or Sickler, of course, as you're aware. I believe the new corridor would address your question in a positive way, not so much a negative way.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. We're continuing to take your questions and comments on Facebook or email at contact@llcorridor.com or by phone 575-202-9213. This next comment or question comes from Tom Spangler on Facebook. They're asking, can you outline the details between Phase 1 and Phase 2? Kevin, you want to address that?
Sure, and I'll make an attempt at that by saying we don't know yet if there is a Phase 1 and a Phase 2. I'm sure what you were looking for perhaps was an exhibit showing Phase 1 break and then Phase 2. As I stated earlier, we're not sure how the funding will roll in for the project. It's a $97 million project, and so far we have total funds of about $65 million. We do anticipate that it will be constructed, designed and constructed in phases, and I probably should back up just a second there so that we are designing the project in its entirety. Of course, we'd want to look at the whole thing so that we don't design it in pieces and then have that perception later in the project that someone didn't think the whole corridor out. So we're definitely doing that now. We're designing the project in its entirety from I-25, including the interchange, all the way across the river bridge to New Mexico 47 and that intersection. To address your comment on the phases, right now we're anticipating that there's phasing enough funding to have an initial phase, not necessarily phase one of how many, but to build the intersection at New Mexico 47 and then continue towards the west, including the river bridge, and then tie into New Mexico 314. And then the number of phases after that would depend on the amount of funding that is accumulated in the time we spend designing and constructing. And then, of course, other conditions that may play into the project. But thank you for your question.
Thank you, Kevin. This next comment or question came from Laura Lee Armstrong. She is saying that Ideal Road is already a shortcut for people going from New Mexico 6 to New Mexico 47. With an intersection at the new road and Ideal, I'm concerned about the increases of traffic that is headed to Tomé or the Rio communities. Is this being considered? Kevin?
It is being considered, and it's very similar to the question that was just asked about Sickler Road. And Meadow Lake, when that question came up, Ideal Road was considered in all of the traffic studies very seriously. We do have all of the numbers for Sickler or for Ideal Road. So your question was, has it been considered? Yes, it is considered. It is in the traffic model. We're aware of the numbers. They do suggest that currently people use that as a shortcut. It is hard to tell how that would what would happen to that, whether it would increase or decrease in the future. But to answer your question, yes, we are aware of it and we're looking at it.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, I would remind everybody that if you missed out on the presentation, you can watch it again. It will continue to be on the Village of Los Lunas' Facebook page. You can also go to our website, llcorridor.com, and there's a YouTube and a Facebook link there that you can see. We do have a few more questions that are continuing to come in. This question is from Dave Tyron, and he is asking, have you calculated the improved response times for emergency vehicles to the eastern portions of the county, i.e. Meadow Lake, for an ambulance, for example? And so how much quicker can emergency vehicles get there now that we have a new roadway? Kevin, you want to address that?
We have looked at that, and I'm going off memory here, so I may be off a minute or two. But we did look at during the most congested times on New Mexico 6, which is that afternoon peak traffic, actually between about 6 and 8. There are times when that backs up considerably, and we've modeled time of an emergency vehicle to get from the interstate across over to a location beyond New Mexico 47. And if I recall from the study, it was about a 31-minute response time. Now things happen where sometimes the emergency vehicles can go into the oncoming lanes and use that, or travel down the median, so sometimes that gets shortened. And with the new corridor alleviating some of the traffic, that response time was reduced to, I believe, between 7 and 9 minutes. So yes, it is reduced considerably.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, we would encourage you guys, if you think of something in the next few days and you want to make a comment, we are going to continue to take your comments for at least the next 2 weeks. If you want to continue to post on the Facebook page, send us emails or call us, we will continue to address your comments. And then the formal comment period will end after those 2 weeks, but we will continue to address your questions or comments as they do come in. This next comment is from Tim Spangler. He is asking, is the plan to begin construction at New Mexico 47 or I-25? Kevin?
Tim, good question. And I probably, maybe I wasn't as clear as I could have been earlier, but to answer your question, we are anticipating now that we would start at New Mexico 47 with that intersection and the corridor, and then continue towards the west, build the lanes to link New Mexico 47 to the new river bridge across the river and tie that into New Mexico 314. That's what we anticipate as the starting phase. As you know, a lot of this corridor is offline. There's not currently traveling public, especially in that stretch. As we look between New Mexico 314 and the interstate, a lot of our new alignment is south of the existing Morris Road, and of course the interchange is new at I-25. So we are looking at that east end as an initial phase, and then would progress towards the west, towards the interstate.
Thank you, Kevin. We do have another comment from Diane Walden, and she is saying that it takes 45 minutes to drive from Camelot to New Mexico 236 during rush hour. 263, excuse me, which is rush hour from 3:30 p.m. to 6 or 7 p.m. And yes, I do believe that is probably an accurate statement. It is a very congested route, and this corridor should help alleviate that significantly. Again, I would encourage you guys to continue to comment and question if you have any. We will continue to respond to those live. And then again, as I mentioned before, we will continue to respond to your questions for at least the next 2 weeks. We will continue to respond to them beyond that, but for the record, for the next 2 weeks. Okay, we have another question coming in on Facebook. And this question is from Stacy Shane, and she is asking, where can we get a better map of the project? I can't see it online. Kevin, do you want to address the best way of doing that? I know we do have the project website, llcorridor.com, and then we also have the Village of Los Lunas has this project on their website as well, and you can see those maps there. I don't know that we have a current up-to-date map available on the website at the moment, but that's something that we can probably add in the near future. Okay, we do have a follow-up question or comment coming in. Okay. I think the concern of this comment is that New Mexico 6 is heavily congested, and this may not improve that congestion significantly. Again, if you guys have more comments or questions, please comment on our Facebook page, email us, contact@llcorridor.com, or call us 575-202-9213. We really appreciate all of your comments and questions tonight, and appreciate your time and your feedback.
I'm not sure if you got this one, but I'm posting it just in case you don't
And this comment or question came from Jerry Rhodes, and they're asking, why are you starting on the east instead of the west? Do you want to address that one?
And that is a very good question. We've considered both. The short answer to the question is that no matter where we start, the benefit of the entire project would not be realized until we complete the entire corridor. So there's two schools of thought. One is to build the interchange and to connect that to New Mexico 314, and that would be a smart way to use the funding. And then, of course, the exact flip side of that is to start at New Mexico 47 and use the current funding to come west towards 314, somewhat one phase or the other. What we've looked at is it looks like the eastern portion of the project may be quicker to get to design and construction which would help us meet the requirements of the funding that we've received, which is a deadline by the end of 2023, allowing us 6 months to close out the project and take care of documentation that we need to with the Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration. But I definitely understand where your question comes from, that it would make sense possibly to start at the interchange and go the other way. But as I've stated, we could go one way or the other, but we won't realize the full benefits until the entire corridor is constructed.
Thank you, Kevin. I believe you also had a phone comment that you wanted to address.
I did. We had on a phone comment from Dominic Vigil, and we know him from our project meetings, and he represents the correction facility. And he was asking me if I could correct a comment I made on the barrier wall at the correction facility. And I think I know, so there was a comment that came in, and I thought it read something like, will the correction facility be completely walled off, or will a wall be constructed along those limits? And I took that question to mean, would that be completely blocked off? And that's the way I answered it. So if there's a misunderstanding there, I apologize. To be more clear, we are looking at, and in the study that happened, that was completed 10 to 12 years ago, there is a sound wall that was anticipated in the location that is between the interstate and the intersection with Sickler, which is also at the main entrance to that correction facility. So we do anticipate most likely there would be a wall there. And previously I was answering a question that I thought somebody was suggesting a very tall wall along that entire area, which would not be the case at this point.
Okay. Diane Walden is asking for a clarification, and I think I can take care of this. She is saying you're starting the project on New Mexico 47. However, the plan that was mailed out, New Mexico 47, was the end of the project. And Diana, just to answer that, from an engineering perspective, our plans are set up to read from west to east. And so that's why us as engineers are referring to that as the end of the project. That doesn't necessarily mean that's where construction will begin. And so we apologize for that confusion. We as engineers often forget that other people don't understand our language. So we apologize for that. Okay, Dave Tyron also has another comment or question. He says, will the new I-25 interchange travel west of I-25? Kevin?
In the initial construction, there is a west leg planned for a few hundred feet. So we would do that. The process that we have to go through on the interchange for the Federal Highway Administration requires you to look at the entire interchange, which we are doing. With part of this construction, we would stub it to the west. However, at the property line, that becomes private property, and that is known as the Huning Ranch area, and it's right now a residential subdivision, and phases are being constructed. That property is master planned, where a road coming from New Mexico 6 is anticipated to come down through that development, and then would come and tie in to that leg. So the quick answer is our project would just stub out to the property line. The long-term answer is that the master plan for the area for residential development would tie into that leg. So yes, in the future there would be a roadway extending further to the west.
Thank you, Kevin.
More questions right now, or just ask for any final questions?
Okay. We currently don't have any more questions that have been received on Facebook or email or called in. So again, I appreciate your participation tonight. We appreciate all of your questions and your comments. And please feel free to continue to ask us questions or provide us comments. As I mentioned before, we will have question and comments open for the next 2 weeks, which will be part of the official record, and then we will continue to address your comments and questions as we go forward throughout the project. Again, our email address is contact@llcorridor.com. You can reach us by phone at 575-202-9213, or of course comment on our Facebook post.
There aren't any questions coming in on Facebook, and I asked, are there any final questions?
Okay. So we haven't had any comments or questions come in for the last few minutes, and so with that, again, I would like to thank you all for your participation tonight, and we would like to continue to ask you guys to be engaged and part of this process, and thank you, and have a good night.